Tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. We're going to be having our hashtag Africa Focus feature. This is a part of the show where we focus on the vast African continent, and we look at some of the biggest stories that are shaping Africa at this moment. This time around, we're not going very far. We're just going a bit northeast of South Africa to our very close neighbors, Mozambique, where it's news again. The proverbial democratic flame flickers in the wind once more. The main opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, has been slapped with 5 very, very serious charges, including instigating terrorism, just months after leading mass protests over a disputed election in Mozambique. I think you can remember we were covering those protests quite closely here on Salam Media. And Mondlane himself has responded, saying this is a pure political retaliation. It is punishment for daring to call out what he describes as massive electoral fraud under President Daniel Chapo. The October 2024 elections in Mozambique were filled with violence, 400 dead, over 600 injured, and now dozens of police officers are facing a trial. But many are asking, and that's the question we're asking this morning, who's really being held accountable here? And is this about justice or about silencing dissent? Joining us now from Maputo is Professor Adriano Nuvunga, a very good friend of the show. You know his voice, especially when it comes to Mozambique politics. He's the director at the Center for Democracy and Development and one of Mozambique's leading voices on governance and human rights. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you here on Salam Media, and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. I think we can kickstart the conversation to the heart of it all. The charges against Venancio Mondlane, quite serious. Terrorism, incitement of violence. How are you responding to this? What's your first initial reaction to those accusations labeled against Venancio Mondlane? And most importantly, how is the public of Mozambique receiving these news? All right, we seem to have lost Professor Adriano Nuvunga. While we try and get him back, I think this is very, very important to ponder upon, especially if you remember the protests that have, taken place in Mozambique after the elections. There was a lot of them. A lot of lives were lost, and Mozambique, I think, turned into a zone of instability for a very, very long time. There was a peace deal that was drawn up between the sitting president Daniel Chapo and Venancio Mondlane, but it seems like it's not holding water. It seems like the government of Mozambique is retaliating against dissent, against what many Mozambicans themselves have labeled as an elections which was not representation of their choices. They're saying they didn't vote Frelimo. They didn't vote Daniel Chapo in. In fact, they wanted Venancio Mondlane to be president. That's why there was weeks long protests. So yeah, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to try and get Professor Nuvunga, I think, to give us the latest. He's currently in Maputo right now, and he'll be able to tell us what is happening in that part of the world. Okay, I think we have Professor Adriano back. Prof, can you hear me? Professor Nuvunga, are you able to hear me?
Clear and loud and clear.
Yes. Perfect. I think before we lost you there, I just wanted your initial reactions to those very, very serious charges labeled against Venancio Mondlane. Their charges of terrorism, inciting violence. Just how are you reacting to them? They're very serious, and most importantly, how is the public of Mozambique reacting to them after those protests that we saw earlier on in the year?
This is clearly a weaponization of the law, of the judiciary for political gains. This is Frelimo using the judiciary, which it controls, obviously, to silence opponents, to target opponents. This is more than retaliation. This is preparing the ground to prevent Venancio Mondlane from, number one, from registering his political party. They don't want him to register his political party. He has, soon after the end of the protest, submitted the paperwork for him to register his political party. They haven't yet legalized the political party, and they have elapsed all the timelines provided in the law to register the political party. And this is number one. Number two, they aim at preventing him from standing for the 2029 elections, considering the number of years that he would serve if sentenced. It would mean that he would immediately be banned from standing for the next elections. So the objective here is really to silence him now, to keep him busy protecting himself, failing the intention of him registering his political party, and more importantly, is to preempt him contesting the 2029 presidential elections. This is a weaponization of the judiciary. It is not novel in Mozambique. The Mozambique's 3-decade of democracy has been underpinned by weaponization of the law, by instrumentalization of governance to silence opponents, to marginalize and to weaken opponents. So this is something that the public of Mozambique saw it coming. It was expected that something of this sort would happen, but perhaps not at this magnitude of charging him with terrorist incitement, because no one in the country saw that happening. Perhaps what people have seen is the police that is supposed to protect lives, to protect freedoms, to protect those who were in the street protesting. It was the police rather shooting to kill, and the number of the victims is around 500 people that have been killed by the police. It should be that institution that should be charged with acting against the life of Mozambicans, and not the opponent. And also, you need here to consider that the tone after President Chap was inaugurated was that of dialogue, was that of peace and reconciliation. So charging him the way they're doing now is clearly further exacerbating the tensions, the polarization, which will not contribute in no way for the much needed peace and stability and reconciliation, which is what we need in order to produce in this country to have prosperity that can be shared with all segments of society.
Most definitely. And I want to touch on that point exactly. You mentioned that, this is not something, this is something that was expected rather from, people in Mozambique. You almost kind of knew that the government was not going to take this lying down, but I'm thinking otherwise, because later, earlier on in the year, we saw a peace agreement. I think it was in March, as you mentioned. There was even a reconciliation law that was passed later on in April. But it looks like there's a reversal now. Can you maybe just take us through what the Frelimo government was thinking when they made those propositions of peace and reconciliation, and ultimately, why was there a sliding back into this confrontational approach against Venancio Mondlane?
No, there is not a reversal here. No. The signing of that agreement with all those political parties, not only it is a deja vu, this is not novel. Frelimo's rule has since been backed by fraudulent elections. And those fraudulent elections have since 1999 been followed by violence. And the violence always ended by signing some form of agreement. In the past, it was an agreement with the late Yakama of Renamo political party, and now it is with these political parties, but it has since been an exclusionary agreement. Remember, Venancio was not in that table of negotiation. He was excluded. So it was right at the beginning, not only something that it was not new, it was path dependent, but also it was excluding the main contender of the elections at that time. Venancio was not included. So there was also instrumentalization of that process, the weaponization of that dialogue to exclude, to marginalize, to isolate Venancio Mondlane from participating in that process. So from outside, it might have appeared that Mozambique is moving in the trajectory of inclusive dialogue. Far from that. It was a manipulation aimed at securing power. Once power is secured, and now they are seated in their seats, now they are using the instruments of governance, the judiciary, to decisively target their main opponent, who was already been isolated, marginalized from the peace process.
Yeah, I think very, very important that you iron that out. There are fears. There are fears that democracy in Mozambique is quite literally hanging by a thread. Would you say that's a fair assessment, number one? And number two, how fragile is the current political climate right now? How likely are we to see the same uproar, the same demonstrations that we saw after the elections in October? Are people still angry? Do people still want to go out to the streets to protest against a government that has killed, as you mentioned, so many of them and continues to victimize someone they consider their leader and someone that they feel like they voted for to lead Mozambique forward in the next coming years?
Yeah. Mozambique's democracy has since been so fragile. It is a democracy that survived through this sort of agreements targeting here and there, and exclusion, marginalization, targeting killing of human rights defenders, of activists and democracy defenders. So it's a democracy that has since been fragile, weak, exclusionary, and surviving on targeting and killing opponents. Now, the big difference is that whereas in the past, the violence was kind of conducted through weapons by the then rebel movement, now it is urban-based by the young people who are disenfranchised, who have no benefit of the current status quo because the inequality, the number of people that have been pushed to below poverty line in the past decade, it has been skyrocketing. And in a context where there is an exponential growth of population in Mozambique, and Frelimo is unable to deliver. He's unable to deliver because of corruption, of grand corruption. These people, they are dilapidating Mozambique's resources. They are not using Mozambique's resource endowment to develop the country, to promote inclusive development. That is not happening. So look at society. Structurally speaking, the factors, the enablers for unrests, for instability, this out there in the cities. There's nothing happening. So Venancio, he appeared as an expression of that disenfranchisement, of that disillusionment, of the marginalization. So without Frelimo addressing substantively these issues of skyrocketing poverty, skyrocketing inequality, growing perceptions of state corruption, the factors for more protests, more demonstrations in the urban areas. It is out there. It is only needs to be mobilized. And Venancio was able to do that, hence targeting him, thinking that he is the main problem. But the problem is not Venancio. The problem is the corrupt Frelimo governance that is not enabling the use of Mozambique's wealth to tackle poverty, to tackle exclusion, to tackle marginalization, quite in the opposite. So Mozambique's democracy is at the brink, not only because Venancio is being targeted by the judiciary, is at the brink because the people of this country are disillusioned. The people of this country, particularly the young people, they see their leaders as not legitimate because they see them becoming, they have livelihoods like the sheikhs of the Arabic nations, but the populations of this country is being pushed on a daily basis to below poverty line. So it is really a test, or it's more than democracy. It's a test for the stability of the nation. And that stability has the potential of affecting the entire region.
Most definitely. And it may sound like you're speaking for Mozambique only when you just mention the circumstances that people find themselves in, but you're essentially speaking for the whole of Africa. As a South African, I can relate to whatever you're talking about in Mozambique. But just to wrap it up, what's the latest that we can look forward to now regarding these charges? And how has Venancio Mondlane himself responded to them?
Well, Venancio responded saying that the public prosecutor, he has the right to do that. He has done that. He was given a timeline, I think 15 days to reply to that. He will contract lawyers to reply to that. And we're expecting here a 6-month period, which is going to be very tense until the public prosecutor has finally submitted the indictment to the courts, and the courts are expected to start the process of hearing. And this, as a weaponized process, is going to be lingering until the next elections. And I've said the objective is to frustrate him from registering his political party. It is to keep him at bay from participating. So this will be lingering with back and forth until the next election.
And we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that. Prof, ciao and obrigado. Always a pleasure having you on Salam Media. And I know we'll be talking again in the not so distant future. Maybe on something else, because you said I only call you when something is happening in Mozambique.
Thank you, Silo.
There you go, Professor Adriano Nuvunga coming to us live from Maputo, giving us the latest on the breaking story there. Their main opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, charged with terrorism and inciting violence. This is after those questioned elections in October 2024, where the people of Mozambique are saying this is not the government we voted for. Frelimo rigged the elections. We voted for Venancio Mondlane. And, the government says, well, no, not really. Frelimo won the elections, and we, in fact, charging Venancio Mondlane with terrorism and inciting violence, which is very, very serious. And it's a story that we'll be keeping a very keen and close eye on, because, as I mentioned, Mozambique is just on our doorstep, it's on our border. And whatever happens there, if there's instability, ultimately it will trickle down to South Africa, and we're going to be affected by it. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.